Hello all, it's Andy McCann again with The Garage in Woodstock and Town Lake, giving you some insight on programming and why we do what we do. This one's going to focus on actual programming the 8-week session for us, as well as giving you guys some insight into why we do strength training at all. Okay, so I'm going to go into our programming. What we're doing right here is we've got an 8-week cycle that we've created. And we're following particular strength training methods, but we're altering to fit into a CrossFit paradigm. So what does that mean? CrossFit is the main thing we're doing here. So you see these WODs that we're posting, and they'll be adjusted. So you can look at this now, but they may not be exactly what you see, but we'll be adjusting as we go along. So we've got some workouts listed out here, and it is the key of what we do. We want you doing these workouts because it's what CrossFit does. It's getting you fit through intense training, moving large loads over long distances quickly, and that is what we do. We also know that we all could be stronger and we will move a little bit faster in this lifting large loads if we can focus a bit on lifting, which is why all CrossFit gyms have a strength component, because lifting heavy things gets you strong pretty darn fast. We're adding that back into it. So if you look at this, we have got these 8 weeks programmed out. Justin's programming the first 2 weeks, then Tim, then Christian, then myself. And you'll notice that we always will, slant towards things that we like. So you'll see a variety based on who's programming and by the 2-week session. If you notice down on mine, I actually like chippers. I like lots of movements. This is not the favorite of some people, but I like it, so it's in there. There are some mono movements, so some things like Randy, which is just a snatch, and you just do it for time and go. And there's reasons to do that. One, it's a named workout, and it's kind of cool. But also, it's moving fast with explosion. 75 pounds is pretty light for most folks. For me, it's light on the light side, even though I don't snatch very much. And that will help with explosion over time, kind of like the 10 minutes of box jumps. So there's different reasons for why we do and what we do. But let me get into this strength cycle and why we have that. First thing is you have to realize is there's a ton of methods out there, and we're going to go through a couple of these. You can read this on your own or pause the video and look at it. I'll give you some of the highlights. So some strength training philosophies. First, there's a guy named Jim Wendler. He has the Wendler philosophy. So it's he's an American, and I don't know what I wrote there. He's American, and he studied under Simmons, who we will see in a little bit down here. There he is, Lou Simmons. So he took his method, modified linear progression, so not a straight, thus not linear progression. So he wants to have you lift doing the same movements in a month with different sets. So you find your 1 rep max, you'll start with a percentage, and you'll do this 5-3 or 3 sets of 5, 3 sets of 3, etc., and then rest. And then next month you add weight. So you'll probably add 5 pounds to everything. You'll notice we do something like this. So it is a modified linear progression. Then you have, let me slide down here to linear progression, which is, of course, he was modified. So Rippetoe, who was a big CrossFit strength coach, and he wrote the book Starting Strength, he was big into this, or still is. And it's simple movements and the same movements, and you add 5 pounds each week. So similar, except that you are always going for a very similar rep scheme and using the very similar movements, and you're simply adding weight. So it's a straight linear progression. So you decrease the volume and you increase the intensity. Let me back up and explain that for a second. So what is volume and what is intensity, and what did I just say there? All right, so there are words inside of the CrossFit arena and words inside of the strength training arena that are the same but don't correlate. So it's, just to help confuse everybody, right? But intensity. For us in CrossFit, intensity is simply, hey, I'm on the floor dead, right? I moved. It's equating to power. And what is power? So power is work divided by time. And so obviously we know what time is. So what is work? So let's pop over to that. Work is your force, or in this case, it's the weight applied. It's a mass applied with gravity. So it's your weight, your force, times the distance moved. So, for instance, if I'm doing a pull-up, my body weight is 170 pounds. The distance is the length of my arms. Let's just call it 2 feet. So the work done is 170 times 2, which is 340 foot-pounds of work. So then power is those foot-pounds over time. So how many pull-ups did I do? For example, if I do 10 pull-ups in 10 minutes versus if I did 10 pull-ups in 1 minute, the power of 10 pull-ups in 1 minute is a lot greater than 10 pull-ups in 10 minutes. Obviously, that makes sense. So doing pull-ups faster is more powerful and more intense and hurts more. That's why we do it. All right, going back to this intensity. So intensity in strength world is lifting as much as you can. So an intense lift for me on a deadlift would be 400 pounds because that is my max. So it's a 1 rep max. Volume. Volume is what I am doing or the number of lifts I'm doing in that movement. So if I'm doing a 1 rep max, it's very intense, but I'm probably only going to do it once or twice, right? So 1 lift, maybe 2 lifts at that weight, not much volume. If I drop it down to say 70% of my 1 rep max, then I will do a lot more volume. So it's more sets, more reps. Basically, it's muscle burning out versus I can't lift it at all. Okay. Then of course you have sets and reps. And then there's something down here called periodization. Periodization is simply this right here. It's just modulating the volume and the intensity and the frequency over time to stimulate gains and allow recovery. So the recovery is something that we don't focus too much on. That's why CrossFit pushes for their 3 on, 1 off, so you have a 1 day of rest in there. It just doesn't work well for most people. Some people, like Eric Richards, does 3 on, 1 off, then 2 on, 1 off, I think is how he rolls it, or maybe 1 and 1. Other people, most of us do 5 on, 2 off, some sort of movement like that. So periodization is what we as coaches are trying to figure out in strength, how to put that into CrossFit. So let's go back to that Word document. If you look at Glassman, Glassman is the guy who created CrossFit. He says to get stronger, do CrossFit. You know, just do it, nothing else, do CrossFit, period. It will get you stronger. When he programs, they actually program in their 3 days. One of them is a lift day, so they've got their intensity, heavy lifting, at that moment. Most people don't do that. Most people follow a different method because it is not as complementary to everyone's life, and we are trying to gain that strength in other ways. So Glassman says just simply do CrossFit. Of course, there's a Bulgarian method, which is do Olympic lifts only and make things heavy. Down here, you have a conjugate method developed by the Russians, who then this guy, Louis Simmons, who has a book, West Side, I think it's a book. Anyway, Outlaw CrossFit, the guy Rudy, he uses this in a limited conjugate method, but so he likes to alter the movements, and oh, there it is, West Side Barbell, and he does both heavy and speed, but he also uses bands. So we don't use bands all that much, but we do have heavy and we do have speed. Heavy would be like a bench press or a 1 rep max or something, and speed is like a jerk. That's a fast movement. So he's into both of those. So which one's right? Well, I'll tell you this. If any of them were crazy wrong, they wouldn't make the list of possible things we could do. So all of them are right to a degree. The one thing that they don't consider, except for Glassman, is that we are actually doing CrossFit on top of all this. So we would like to find a strength program for you guys that increases the strength using things that we know work. So Wendler or Simmons, and add it to what we already know works, CrossFit. But the strength gains inside of CrossFit over time decrease as you keep your volume up. So if you remember the volume back here, so a 95-pound thruster isn't that tough for me anymore. Thus, it becomes more volume and less intense. So to a new person, that 95-pound thruster is very intense because that's pretty much all they can do, right? So the intensity is high, but over time, the intensity drops off for volume. So we're trying to keep the intensity up with the strength as well as control the volume with the number of reps. All right, I wanted to finish up with some ideas on CrossFit. Like, hey, Andy, why isn't this a science? Why isn't it exactly spelled out? And you can read it in Coach Glassman, the guy who started it all, his own words. So the methodology that drives CrossFit is entirely empirical. What does empirical mean? Well, let's pop over to our definitions. Originating in the, or based on observation or experience. So basically, I observed it or I experienced it. So it's what we did stuff and it worked, right? So that is what he says, is we created CrossFit based on we did a few things and we found that it actually worked. So we believe that meaningful statements about safety, efficiency, and efficacy, or efficacy and efficiency, can be supported by measurable, observable, repeatable facts. So basically, again, backing up this empirical idea. So basically, he's saying, I didn't sit down and noodle this out in my head. I thought about it and then started putting things into practice and rotated and changed based on what I saw. So it's empirically driven and clinically tested. So down here he says this right here. He starts talking about the sport of fitness, and he says, we've learned that harnessing the natural camaraderie, competition, and fun of a sport yields an intensity that can't be matched. So intensity, what is he referring to? Is he referring back to the intensity that I showed you earlier? So this intensity, not the strength intensity, but he's referring back to the power intensity. So there's a measurable effect that if I'm competing against somebody, I will do my work faster. So that's why we have classes done in a group environment and we have you posting on the board, is because intensity builds this fitness. CrossFit's prime secret in the sauce is intensity. Community drives intensity. And why do we do some of the crazy things that we do? For instance, if you look back on, if you were, paused our programming and looked later on, you've got Tim's programming here, and he had something here. He's got cheat curls. What is that? I don't even know yet. We're about to find out. He's got some Turkish get-ups with all this other stuff in there. So he's got lots of oddities programmed into his workout. Why? When you go back and look at these definitions, I can't even find my own stuff. So CrossFit increases work capacity against broad time and modal domains. What does that mean? So time, obviously times are broad, so it's usually the 5 to 30 minutes, and modal, the movement. So we're changing what the movements and the times, and we're going to increase the work capacity across those. So this is what we're trying to do for you, is put all this stuff into perspective, create a program that works for you. So whether you're young or whether you're old like me, and you have different goals. I want to be a longer distance runner, so do I care to be maybe crazy strong? No, not really. I'm willing to sacrifice some of my strength for speed. So you kind of need to know that too. So I maybe alter my workout slightly if I need to. So it's a long process. I'm saying a lot of this because I want you guys to understand that it's not just, we just pulled this out of a hat and we don't really know what's going on. It's testing and redefining and molding the workouts based on what we see we need. So if we had a lot of games competitors, we would program slightly different for those guys. But what we have is people like me and you that are just average day people who want to have a higher quality of life. So how do we help deliver a higher quality of life? Well, those higher quality of life comes through just basic CrossFit and getting more intense, as well as building that strength. So as you see, there's a lot of different strength methods. Most of these, if you just applied them directly to what we're doing, wouldn't work, which is why we alter them a bit to fit the paradigm that CrossFit delivers, which is intensity and moving those large loads over long distances in a quicker amount of time. Hopefully this helps. You'll be seeing a lot more from this from us, and we'll probably do it in more than one take so you don't hear me stumble my way through in certain places. All right, hope it was fun.